This morning, what in the world is happening at the Dallas Zoo?
Stay woke, stay vigilant. Most people around the zoo who are connected to the zoo, they know their neighborhoods.
Mayor Pro Tem Carolyn King Arnold on whether she still has confidence in the private group managing the city zoo and why Dallas's new deck park nearby there, south of the skyline, lacks millions of dollars to finish construction. Ted Cruz just filed a bill to limit senators to 2 terms in office, even as he is running for a 3rd. A new effort underway in Austin right now to eliminate the STAAR test and let districts decide how to measure their student success. State Rep Matt Shaheen on the legislation he recently filed. And education savings accounts instead of vouchers. That idea is picking up momentum at the state capitol. Might this be the approach that finally helps Texas Republicans expand school choice?
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Jason Whiteley. You know, days of winter weather could not stop Texas politics. Here are some of the headlines we've been watching. The race for 2024, the presidential race, is coming to Texas. Don't expect rallies from presidential candidates. Texas is not in play next year, but candidates are coming to our state to raise money. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis will be in Dallas and in Houston next month for fundraisers. Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, and others will be in Austin later this month. Did you hear what Ted Cruz did the other day? He filed a bill to impose term limits, limiting U.S. senators to 2 terms. This even as he runs for a 3rd term in office. Cruz said the term limits are critical to fixing what's wrong in D.C., but the senator did not take questions from reporters. His legislation is a constitutional amendment. It's been tried many times before over the years, but neither party has ever passed it. And a large majority of Texans want our state to loosen up when it comes to marijuana. The University of Houston did this new survey. 4 out of 5 Texans say they want to expand the state's medical marijuana program. The same number says having weed should no longer be a crime, but bills to do just that, they have not gotten past the state's Republican-led legislature over the years. This morning, we are beginning with an issue that has made national news over the last week, but for all the wrong reasons. The Dallas Zoo. It is city-owned, but it is privately managed, and it is the marquee attraction in Mayor Pro Tem Carolyn King Arnold's council district. She took our questions about the zoo's problems and revealed that the city deck park being built nearby over Interstate 35, it is short millions of dollars if it is to ever get finished. Mayor Pro Tem, thanks for being on the program with us this morning. Your district, District 4 in the city of Dallas, made national news, maybe even some world news with what's going on at the Dallas Zoo. Leopard got out of its enclosure last month. A vulture died under mysterious circumstances. And then just last week, 2 monkeys were stolen. They were recovered. The Dallas Zoo has its problems, as you know. It's city-owned. It's privately managed. Should the city intervene here now after 3 or 4 mysterious incidents?
Well, I will say this, the zoo remains one of the jewels in our community. And so it is with that, we are working as partners. And so our goal, of course, is to provide public safety. And so we're going to continue to partner with the zoo and that private group to just see how we can make sure or ensure that the surrounding neighborhoods and the constituents who are in that area, whether they're shopping or just walking, they feel safe.
I'm sure you have questions like the rest of us. I go to the zoo quite often with my 2 sons, but what in the world is going on there?
Well, I just think what's happening now is just, as stated earlier, is something that we've not seen before. And that's the world that we live in. You always have someone who wants to test the system.
Mayor Pro Tem, do you know if these incidents are all related or are they separate?
Well, the investigation is still ongoing. We're very happy that we were able to get partnership with the Lancaster police and, of course, that church that gave us some tips. And we're continuing to encourage anyone who may have been in the zoo on those days that we have had those incidents to take place. Look at their camera video. They may have very well taken a picture of someone or something that happened that triggered or contributed to those incidents. And so we're just saying this. stay woke, stay vigilant. Most people around the zoo who are connected to the zoo, they know their neighborhoods. So we just have to be a little bit more vigilant and staying woke and paying attention to details a little bit more.
Right now, do you still have confidence in that private organization that manages the zoo based on everything that's happened?
I do. And I've been in daily contact with Mr. Greg Hudson. And so I have all the confidence in the world with the zoo and the management. We just want to make sure that we are there as partners in this city to make sure that the goals that we set when that particular group was given the charge of management is that we reach our goal to make sure that is one of the safest zoos that we have, not only in Texas, but across the United States.
There's a new deck park being built across Interstate 35, just south of the skyline there. It's a $172 million project. You said in council recently that it's struggling financially. How much money is left to be raised for this?
I keep hearing somewhere in the ballpark of that private group that's raising money, we probably need an additional $20 million. And that is what it concerns me, is that we must have those a plan or philanthropic dollars to come in to support that deck park, because it is on the major thoroughfare, a gateway into the southern Dallas. And so there was a commitment made to build the park, a commitment, of course, made to build the gateway. And so now we must come through on the promise that was made when we sat down at the table, we voted on around the horseshoe. And so now the public is looking for us to come through with the funding for that particular park, because it's going to also benefit economic development in our area.
Mayor Pro Tem, $20 million is a lot left to raise. Did some donor back out of the project?
Evidently, in the last couple of months, I would say, where talks have been held, there was a need really for probably $80 million or more. But RTC has, at least my understanding, has come through to pledge at least a portion of that. And so the portion that they have given, or according to the grants that I'm understanding that is out there, and the match, still leaves a balance of approximately $20 million.
Do you expect, because of this lack of $20 million, that this project is going to be delayed in opening?
I can't really answer that question in terms of just the timeline. It's my hope that it's not delayed. I just know that I continue to prioritize that in my conversations with Parks and Rec and with anyone that I've been talked to that has a question about the deck park. But this private group has ultimately, that is their job to raise that money. But I'm going to do what I can in my position to continue to rally businesses or other philanthropists to see this project for what it's worth and the value, not only just to this neighborhood, but to this city.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, we appreciate the time and good luck to you on tying off that project.
Well, thank you so very much. And we just look forward to talking to you soon about the other great things that are going on in District 4 across this city.
Now to the legislature, where Republicans are growing confident they might finally expand school choice in our state. Rural Republicans have never liked school vouchers, which is tax money to pay for private school tuition. But Governor Abbott now supports another approach, ESAs, or education savings accounts, which parents could use to pay for tutoring, college, or anything school related. Patrick Svitek is in for Aya Mitra this morning. He's a primary political correspondent for the Texas Tribune in Austin. Patrick, good to see you. Good to have you back on the program here. With the governor now behind ESAs, is this an approach that rural Republicans might finally get on board with to help that party pass or expand school choice?
I don't think Abbott's embrace of ESAs right now does anything to bring on new support, especially among rural Republicans. What we have heard from the lieutenant governor is that he does want to structure this legislation in a way that does address at least some of the concerns of rural communities. That's going to be key, I think, to bringing them on board. We haven't seen the specifics of that legislation yet, so that's really still to come. But no, Abbott just coming out and saying he wants ESAs, I don't think that changes the politics of it that much. It just puts a little more meat on the bone compared to Abbott's previous statements on his prioritization of school choice this session.
All right, Patrick, thanks a lot for that. ESA is obviously something we want to keep watching for this legislative session. Back to you in a moment here. Coming up next, a new push to kill the STAAR test State Rep Matt Shaheen, a Collin County Republican, trying to do what his predecessors could not. Inside Texas Politics, back in a moment. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. You know, for years, Texas lawmakers have tried to eliminate the STAAR test from public schools. Each effort on this standardized test has gone nowhere. But one Republican says it is time to let school districts select their own standardized testing. State Rep Matt Shaheen represents the western portion of Collin County, and he says he's making education a priority this legislative session. Representative Shaheen, it's good to have you back on our program here. There have been many efforts, as you know, in the past to kill the STAAR test, to replace it with something else. Well, why do you think your idea now has a better chance of potentially passing?
Well, it's great to be with you again. Yeah, let me tell you, I've visited so many schools in my district. I've talked to principals, teachers, I've talked to parents. I've actually talked to some of the students. And the STAAR test, it's well-meaning, but it really isn't an effective way to measure the progress of our students and assessing how our students are doing as far as, are they meeting the TEKS, are they meeting grade level? So there's some other alternatives out there that I'm pushing this next legislative session.
Can the STAAR test be fixed, do you think, to make it work since the infrastructure is already there?
You know, if I know Commissioner Morath wants to fix the STAAR, if you want to use those terms. Here are the disadvantages of the STAAR that need to be fixed, if you will. And I'm open to this approach, but there's some question about the readability. So in other words, when a child on the 8th grade is taking the STAAR test, is it at the 8th grade level? So we need to look at the readability, but there's an approach called adaptive testing. So in other words, when you take the STAAR test, it's going to ask you all these questions. It's already decided what questions you're going to ask, but there's an approach called adaptive testing, right? So it doesn't head you down this path where after the third question, you're just lost and you don't know where to go. There's some online tools that will actually adapt the testing. And what that does for your teacher is it provides a much better picture and much better assessment of not only where the child is, but what are the areas that that child needs better focus on. It's just a much more productive tool for the teachers.
Tell us what you would like to see, what you envision replacing the STAAR test with.
There's a lot of different options out there. I will tell you, a lot of the school districts in my state representative district use the MAP test, but I'm really open to anything. I think if you can have teachers do shorter time period testing throughout the school year, we can do this end of year cumulative reporting for all the federal requirements, all those types of things. But something along those lines that really arm our teachers. Let me tell you, me and a lot of other legislators are really concerned about the gap that exists now with our students because they've gone through virtual education for a year and a half. And this would be a meaningful tool for our teachers.
Representative, the Texas Education Agency obviously defends the STAAR test. The commissioner, Mike Morath, does as well. Have you spoken to him about your legislation?
Oh, absolutely. I've talked to him several times. And
what does he say?
Well, you know, he's down the path that STAAR can be adapted to meet the needs. He acknowledges some issues, but you know, the dialogue with Commissioner Morath, and I think he's a great commissioner. He does a great job. He's very big on testing, and I am too, rating where our students are at, where our schools are at. I just don't agree with him on the right vehicle. So I think we needed an alternative to STAAR. He's going down this approach that you've talked about, changing the STAAR and making it better. Well, we need to determine what's the best approach. Right now, I think it needs to be replaced.
I want to ask another education related question here. School vouchers have had a lot of pushback from rural Republicans in previous sessions, but now Governor Abbott is supporting something called ESAs, Education Savings Accounts, which would essentially let parents use a portion of tax money to fund anything education related, private schools, tutoring, et cetera. Is that something you support? Because you have legislation on this issue as well, too. And more broadly, would this be the key to finally expanding school choice?
I think this is the session if we're going to do something around school choice. To your point, the governor has really been pushing this issue. Parents know what's best for their students. There are special needs students out there. There's students with maybe dyslexia, what have you. I think the more that we empower our parents, the better, and get some parental choice around our schools. And my piece of legislation that you reference, it's a little different here. I think this is where our opportunity is. It actually sets up a separate fund. So we're not talking about public education dollars, a separate The statute calls for $100 million fund outside of public education dollars where children that come from needy families, special needs children, they can apply for these dollars and use it as a scholarship, if you will. So I'm really excited about the opportunity, but you did call it out, right? The challenge is more of our rural legislators, and I'm in open dialogues with them as we speak.
All right, Representative, thanks so much for the time. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Stay warm.
Democrats in Congress are once again pushing to pass the George Floyd Act after what we saw in Memphis. 5 police officers there charged with murder and the death of a man named Tyre Nichols. But this case is a little different. The officers involved were all black, and some are asking why we did not see outrage and protests. It's a question we put to civil rights attorney David Henderson on the latest episode of Y'all-itics.
I think you have seen the outrage. The reason the protests weren't the same is because of the way they controlled release of the video. One, I think releasing it on a Friday night went a long way towards controlling how activists had the capacity to respond. But then you've also got to combine that with a realization that we never saw before, and that is officers being fired and indicted and arrested before you actually release the video. I think when you look at all those factors combined, it puts it into context because the protests are often in response to an inadequate response from law enforcement. Now, I think, yeah.
David, let me ask you about that, because the officers were fired immediately before we ever saw the video, before the public knew what happened. Were they fired because they were black? How much did race play a role in this?
You've never seen a response quite like this. It's unreasonable to believe that race didn't play a role with regard to the officers being black. I understand the issue of race here is multifaceted because Tyre Nichols was also targeted because he was black. There's no way these officers would have beat up a young white man the way that they did to Tyre Nichols.
David Henderson's a former prosecutor. He's turned to a civil rights attorney now, and he took our questions on the latest episode of Y'all-itics. It is out this weekend. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Austin was in dark much of the week last week. The right and the left blamed different folks, and the mayor said the city just has to do a better job. But will there be any political fallout from this? The roundtable is next. Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Patrick Svitek is back with us from the Texas Tribune. Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Bernadine Steptoe is a political producer at WFAA in Dallas. Patrick, let's start with you. Ron DeSantis fundraising in Houston and Dallas next month. Dan Patrick is still backing Donald Trump. DeSantis obviously hasn't declared yet, but what does his coming here for ATM withdrawals mean to a potential run for him?
Yeah, I mean, this is an opportunity for him to get in front of activists and donors in Houston and Dallas, which are home to, at least on the donor side, some of the most generous and prolific donors in the country. And so even though these events will benefit the county parties, the funds raised from these events aren't going to go to Ron DeSantis. But regardless of that, he still gets an audience with a pretty influential crowd. And he gets, an opportunity to speak at length about what he's accomplished in Florida and what he's currently trying to accomplish during their legislative session, I believe. So it's a win-win for him.
And politically speaking, Bud, I mean, can DeSantis pull away any of these Texas Trump voters?
Well, I'd like to see him. I know that Dallas and Houston are where a lot of the money is, but I'd like to see him speak in Collin County or Tarrant County or Williamson County and see how the crowd responds there. It seems like there's still a lot of Trump holdouts. There's a lot of people who aren't sure who they want. They're curious about DeSantis, but they're not ready to buy into his campaign yet.
And Bernadine, it is still early. What do you think?
Well, I think it's still early, but keep in mind that coming to Dallas and coming to Texas to raise money is nothing new, because most candidates for office or presidential candidates do come here. But I think that it shows that he is interested in rubbing shoulders with the donors and the activists, and that he definitely is looking as if he's going to jump in. Yeah,
and obviously raising money for the county parties for these fundraisers that he's attending for each of the GOP parties in those two counties. Let's talk about Austin, Patrick, being in the dark. You are in San Antonio, but Austin spent much of the last week in the dark. The city has to do a better job, the mayor said. The left and the right blame different folks. Is there going to be any political fallout from this, or is this strictly a local issue?
For now, this feels like a local issue, a very important and impactful local issue. It's obviously affected a lot of people in Austin. But for now, it doesn't seem like there is any appetite at the legislature to put forward some kind of, policy as it relates to this. I think folks at the legislature and folks in state leadership were, in some ways just relieved that this wasn't a state power grid issue. You've seen the governor amid all this go to great lengths in his public appearances and on his Twitter account to emphasize that even though Austin is dealing with these localized outages, the state power grid is still, humming along and in a good spot. And so I think there's, if anything, there's relief from state lawmakers and state leaders that this is a localized issue. Of course, I'm sure they sympathize with those affected, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but as a political matter, I'm sure they're relieved it's not a state power grid issue.
Bud?
Well, I think that some of the members of the legislature who want to move more government functions out of Austin will use it to move it out into suburban Travis County or even further, not the whole capital, but some of the major agencies. The big winner really comes off as Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott has said all along that he's against tree ordinances and there needs to be more tree trimming, and he's had his personal experience, and he's turned out to be right.
Bernadine, final word.
I think that if there is some type of pushback, it will be with the local officials. But I agree with Bud that you are going to have some officials who will point to it and say, hey, there still is a need for some type of legislation to deal with the grill.
And it seems like in this situation, trees are likely the issue, with tree limbs freezing and falling onto power lines, at least there in Austin. Guys, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Glad your power is on here in North Texas. Thanks for watching as well. We're back again next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics. Hope you can join us then.